Gender inequality is a hot-button issue in the Middle Eastern country of Iran. It is the subject of such debate and highlighted in global human rights campaigns. Women have suffered for centuries and are still facing obstacles that have been all but abolished in most countries in the world. However, despite all the suppression, Iranian women continue to push the standards and generate hope for their future. This national report will inquire about the struggles that Iranian women face daily and further into what hope lies for them, as well as the aspects of modern-day life that they have had success in reforming. The World Economic Forum's 2017 Global Gender Gap Report ranked Iran in the bottom 5 of countries, specifically 140 to 144, for gender parity. Adversely, Canada is ranked 16th in the world. Iran has a population of 81,988,000, and almost half of which are between 25 and 54 years old. The median age is around 30, and the most important, around 20% of the workforce is constituted by women. Unfortunately, due to the harsh obstacles, the growth of women in the workforce has been only around 7% over the last couple decades. Historically, women's rights have been a roller coaster in Iran. They have dealt with several regime changes and ideologies that have dictated their freedom levels. During the Qajar dynasty from the 1800s to the 20th century, women were isolated and were barred from politics and primarily were assigned to household work and family upbringing. Often upper-class women veiled themselves as protection from non-elite men. At this point in history, women were essentially second-class citizens and deemed inferior to men and had limited rights in affairs such as inheritance, basic education. During the next era, known as the Shah or Pahlavi era in the 1920s and beyond, gave much more freedom to females. There were documented social reforms, mass education, and even paid employment for women. The most applauded reform was the banning of the mandatory Islamic hijab in public in 1962. This gave females the opportunity to live in Western and to live like Westerners, albeit only for a short era in time. The Family Protection Law in 1967 was also put into law, which heavily favored women, restricted polygamy, and raised the marriage age from 13 to 18. One of the final things allowed by the regime was the freedom for women to associate with men in public, vote, divorce, and have a right to abortion in the cases of rape. The years of women reform and empowerment is often referred to as the White Revolution. During the monarchy-style rule by the Pahlavi dynasty and the installment of parliament and a prime minister, at 6 women were even elected. At one point, 6 women were even elected to parliament and 2 appointed by the king to a service in the Senate. However, the era of growing women's rights halted abruptly with the Islamic Revolution and the beginning of what is called the Khomeini. The radical government and its leader, Ayatollah Khomeini, believed that women's sole purpose was to tend household duties and raise large families. This led to restricting of many laws and closing childcare centers, women's centers, and the abolishment of family planning initiatives and abortion clinics. Although the passing of Khomeini's led to some loosening of the laws, only parts of the family protection law were reintroduced. Notably, compulsory hijab was reinstated in 1979. To put the slow progression of human and Iranian women's rights into better perspective, the following comparisons can be made with Canadian women. The right to vote went into law federally for Canadian women in 1999. In Iran, it took until 1963. Women had the right to hold office in Canadian Parliament in 1919, as opposed to the 1980s in Iran. The Divorce Act became legislation in Canada in 1925, but 1967 in Iran. The Canadian federal government has many laws for violence against women, and it took until 1995 for women to make up 50% of the economy labor force, ultimately surpassing men in 2009. Unfortunately, Iranian women are currently stuck at around 20% of the nation's labor force and additionally are still trying to push for more women's safety and violence laws. Currently, in the modern day, in Iran, it was concluded that stereotypes and gender biases that originate from the cultural and traditional structures of the Iranian society were among the most imperative restrictions in the way of women's social and political involvement. Censorship in Iran is the limiting or suppressing of the publishing dissemination of certain information in the Islamic Republic of Iran. The mass majority of censorship is enforced or mandated by the government. This is a very big problem for Iranian women because it debilitates them from communicating with one another on a large scale and hinders their ability to generate momentum, to create a movement and make impactful impressions. Iran is just as underdeveloped as other countries such as Botswana, Chile, Lesotho, Namibia, and Swaziland. In these countries, married women are under permanent guardianship of their husbands and have no right to manage property. Also, husbands can restrict their wives' employment outside the home. The last presidential election had noticeably little women priorities, and the leading conservative candidate was quoted in saying that he intends to help make women good mothers and good wives. Repeating discriminatory and sexist laws increased female sports, and even a quota reserving at least 30% of ministerial positions for women. Women these days are much more educated than men and stay in school much longer, but they suffer from almost double the unemployment figures that the national average. This inability to get a job stems both culturally and politically, which has resulted in a recent surge in sex work. Currently, Iran's newly re-elected president, Hassan Rouhani, has been under more and more pressure to appoint female ministers to his cabinet. In the course of his last term, his all-male list of ministers disappointed his followers, even though he appointed a number of women to vice president positions. Despite this, Shahandokt Movardi, Rouhani's vice president for women and family affairs, has won support amongst women rights activists in Iran. As the pressure increases both domestically and internationally, Iranian businesswomen have made the most of their opportunities and have thrived in many sections. Notably corporate services and other knowledge-based industries. On the political angle, they set a record for most women elected with 17 to join the 290-member body. Additionally, women have begun beating cultural and gender norms by running in more small towns, city elections, and have spawned a lot of media attention with their candidacy. Female ballots have increased by over 6%, and some city councils have begun to encourage women participation. The hope that, in return, the higher female participation and turnout can give females more power and authority to change their everyday lives. Manaz Afakami is a founder and president of Women's Learning Partnership for Rights, Development, and Peace. She has been a leading advocate for women's rights for more than 3 decades, having founded and led several international non-governmental organizations. Due to the revolution, Manaz had to flee Iran in fear of her life and family safety. She is most prominently known for starting the WLP, which stands for the Women's Learning Partnership. The Women's Learning Partnership is probably one of the greatest ways to support Iranian women today. The WLP aims to raise public awareness regarding human rights, specifically for women in Muslim-majority societies. This Afakami led initiatives to help advocate women's work, mobilize activists, and support groups to boost policy and legislative change. Personally, it is quite eye-opening and appalling that in the 21st century there are still women in the world who have been so far behind when it comes to rights. Ideology and freedom. When it comes to rights, ideology and freedom. It puts into great perspective the strides that have been made by the country I live in and have visited and creates a new sense of appreciation for our government. I am therefore more proud to be Canadian and am glad for the woman in my life to not be in such a suppressed environment. It is paramount to point out that there is no society that can develop when half of the members of its population are regarded as merely second-best citizens, and their needs and demands to succeed and develop are completely ignored. Continual and rapid development occurs in countries where males and females, regardless of their genders, can take steps to grow. This is a great point that clearly shows why Iran suffered so much economically and fallen behind in so many regards. In turn, I hope that government bodies worldwide can bring more attention to such matters in hopes of building a more unified and free global economy. I thoroughly understand now the struggles and effort that families go through to emigrate from countries like Iran to free themselves from the many unwarranted and unnecessary obstacles and gender norms that have been constructed. After posing my research question into the struggles of Iranian women and what they go through daily, I have been overwhelmed with including their many hurdles. I am, however, slightly optimistic with the current outlook of women's rights in Iran and the strength of the people like Manaz Afkami behind the reform movement. The current president, cultural norms, and regime have proven to make every step unequivocally difficult, but progress, however slow, is persistent nonetheless. The record-breaking number of the elected women officials may look unimpressive at 17 of 250 members in parliament, for it does signify progress and may continue to inspire the heavily educated and progressive-thinking young generation that dominates Iran's current demographics. Thank you for watching my presentation.